My husband left me for his work wife. Now she's mad I refused to have a relationship with him. My ex Tom left me for Tammy 2 years ago. The first time I met her at a work event, while I was 8 months pregnant with my youngest, she literally looked me up and down and said, "Better up your wife game, or I might steal him." I laughed it off, thinking she was joking. 3 months later, she actually did it. This woman showed up at our house with Tom to help him pack the day he moved out. While I was holding our crying baby, she tried pulling me aside for a one-on-one conversation about how she wanted our relationship to work going forward because she was going to be a permanent part of my life. Then she winked and said, "Told you I'd steal him away." Honestly, I'm thankful she did. Because when Tom made a comment defending her by saying, "She's only 23, her brain isn't fully developed yet," I got the ick so bad it turned my heartbreak into pure relief. This man really left his family for someone whose frontal lobe hasn't finished forming. I got everything in the divorce. The house. Most assets. Everything. We agreed to 50-50 custody because I wanted the kids to have both parents. I stay civil at school events and sports games, so there's no drama, but outside of co-parenting, I couldn't care less about either of them. Everything was fine until last June. Tammy showed up for pickup instead of Tom and practically skipped toward me, shoving her hand in my face to show off this massive engagement ring. She was going on and on about wedding plans and then said she wanted me as a bridesmaid, along with my daughters as flower girls. I just looked at her and said, while loading the kids' stuff. She kept talking about color schemes and venues, and I kept giving her one-word responses. She got visibly upset and left. A few hours later, Tom texted me saying I was being unnecessarily difficult and that Tammy was just trying to include me in their lives. September came around, and the same thing happened. The second I opened my car door at pickup, Tammy blurted out, "I'm pregnant," and she put her hand on her stomach and said, "Tom's finally getting a son." I looked at her and deadpan replied, "I'm sure Lord Tom is thrilled to finally have an heir to king." Tammy did not appreciate that answer. Personally, I thought it was one of my better lines. She stood there blinking at me while Tom looked like he wanted to disappear into the pavement. My oldest daughter snorted so hard she nearly choked on her juice box. I loaded the kids into the car and left. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed.
Tom.
Again. Apparently, I had hurt Tammy's feelings. Which was interesting because Tammy had somehow survived announcing she stole my husband, helping him pack his bags while I held a newborn, and repeatedly inserting herself into my life. Yet a single joke about a royal heir was where we drew the line. I ignored the message. A month later they got married. I was not a bridesmaid. This came as a surprise to absolutely nobody. The girls were flower girls because they wanted to be, and I wasn't about to drag them into adult nonsense. I dropped them off, smiled politely, said congratulations, went home, ordered takeout, watched terrible reality television, and enjoyed my evening. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't, because somewhere along the way, Tammy had developed a fantasy version of me. In her head, we were apparently supposed to become best friends.
I have no idea why.
Maybe because she'd won. Maybe because she expected me to spend the rest of my life thinking about her. Maybe because she'd built her entire relationship around competing with me and couldn't figure out what to do now that I wasn't playing. Whatever the reason, she kept trying. She invited me to baby showers. I declined. She invited me to birthday dinners. I declined. She invited me to girls' nights. I declined. Every invitation got the same response. No thank you. Nothing rude. Nothing dramatic. Just no. Each rejection seemed to confuse her more than the last. One afternoon at soccer practice, she cornered me by the concession stand. "Do you hate me?" I looked up from the coffee I was holding.
No.
"Then why won't you spend time with me?" The genuine confusion in her voice almost made me laugh. Because she honestly didn't understand. I said, "Tammy, you're my ex-husband's wife." Exactly. That's not a reason we'd be friends. She stared at me. I stared back. Finally she said, "But we're family." I nearly dropped my coffee.
Family.
The woman who had announced her intention to steal my husband while I was pregnant was calling us family. I said, "No. We're connected because of the children. That's different. Her face immediately fell. She walked away looking upset. That evening I got another text from Tom. At this point I could have predicted them word for word. Tammy was hurt. Tammy felt rejected. Tammy was trying. Could I please make more of an effort? I finally replied. Tom, I don't dislike Tammy. I don't wish either of you harm. But I don't want a friendship. We co-parent. That's the relationship. He left me on read. For nearly 3 months. It was glorious. Then Christmas happened. The kids split the holiday between houses. Everything was going smoothly until my youngest casually mentioned something over breakfast. Tammy cries about you sometimes. I nearly inhaled a pancake. What? My daughter shrugged. She cries because you don't like her. I set down my fork. Children always deliver information like they're announcing the weather. No warning. No preparation. Just emotional hand grenades tossed directly into your lap. What exactly did she say? My daughter thought for a moment. She said she doesn't understand why you won't give her a chance. I sat there processing that. Because this woman had spent years trying to force a relationship I never asked for. And somehow my refusal had become a personal tragedy. I didn't bring it up. I didn't want the kids in the middle. But things got weirder. A lot weirder. A few months later, my oldest daughter had a school performance. I arrived early and found a seat. Tom and Tammy showed up a few minutes later. There were plenty of empty seats. An entire auditorium full of them. Guess where Tammy sat? Directly beside me. Of course. I felt her settle into the chair. Then she leaned over. Hi. Hi. She smiled. I nodded. Then I returned my attention to the stage. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 15. Eventually she whispered, You know, most people would have become friends by now. I turned slowly. What people? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, then finally admitted, I don't know.
Exactly.
The performance started. I thought the conversation was over. It wasn't. At intermission, she tried again. I feel like we're missing out. On what? A relationship. I genuinely did not know how to answer that. Because every explanation seemed obvious. So I decided to be honest. Not cruel, just honest. Tammy, when Tom left, I moved on. She nodded. Okay. No, I don't think you understand. She frowned. I continued. You became a major character in your own story. In mine, you became paperwork. Her jaw dropped. I wasn't trying to be mean. It was simply true. The divorce happened. The custody agreement happened. Life moved forward. I wasn't sitting at home thinking about them. I wasn't keeping score. I wasn't comparing myself. I wasn't competing. I had bills to pay, children to raise, a career, friends, a life. The story had ended for me years ago. Tammy looked genuinely stunned, like she'd just discovered the earth wasn't the center of the universe. The rest of the evening was blissfully quiet, until 3 days later, when Tom called, actually called, not texted, called. Answered because I assumed something happened to the kids. Instead, he immediately sighed. Did you really tell Tammy she was paperwork? I laughed so hard I had to sit down. That's what upset her. She cried. Tom.
What?
Your wife needs a hobby. Silence. Then a very dangerous silence. The kind where someone wants to argue but knows you're right. Finally, he muttered. You could try being nicer. I nearly dropped my phone. Nicer? Yeah. Tom, when your girlfriend came to my house to help you leave, she winked at me while I held your newborn. More silence. I've been nice for 2 years. He didn't have a response. Because there wasn't one. A few weeks later, everything finally clicked into place. Not for me.
For Tom.
The girls came home after a weekend at their dad's. My oldest sat at the kitchen counter eating cereal. Out of nowhere she said, Dad and Tammy had a huge fight. I sighed. Children. Again, with the emotional grenades. What happened? She shrugged. Tammy was mad because Dad talks about you too much. I froze. Oh. She asked why he always says stuff like, your mom used to do this and your mom was good at that.
Well,
That explained a lot. Suddenly years of bizarre behavior made perfect sense. Tammy didn't want a friendship. She wanted validation. She wanted proof that she'd won. She wanted me to welcome her, approve of her, become friends with her. Because then she wouldn't have to wonder why she was still comparing herself to the woman whose husband she'd taken. And the funniest part? I wasn't comparing us at all. Not even a little. I was busy living my life. Meanwhile, she was still standing at the finish line waiting for a race I'd stopped running years ago. And, apparently for the first time, Tom had finally noticed it too. The pickup exchanges got quieter after that. The text stopped. The invitations stopped. The weird attempts at friendship stopped. Honestly, it was wonderful. Then one afternoon, nearly 2 years after the engagement ring incident, Tammy showed up alone for pickup. No giant announcements. No dramatic reveals. No forced conversations. She looked tired, older somehow, not physically, just exhausted. The baby was in the back seat. The girls were gathering their bags. She walked over. I braced myself. Instead, she said something I never expected. You were right. I blinked. About what? She gave a small laugh. About us not needing a relationship. That was not where I thought this conversation was going. She looked toward the kids. Then back at me. I spent years trying to make you like me. I said nothing. She continued. And I think the real problem was that I needed you too. For the first time since I'd met her, there was no smugness. No competition. No performance. Just honesty. She shook her head. It's embarrassing, actually. A little. But I wasn't going to say that. She smiled weakly. You really don't think about me, do you? I considered it. Then answered truthfully. Only when you're standing in front of me.
to my surprise, she laughed.
Actually laughed. A real one. The girls climbed into her car. The baby started crying. Life kept moving. Tammy opened her door. Then paused. You know, for what it's worth, stealing your husband wasn't exactly the prize I thought it would be. I stared at her. She stared at me. Then we both started laughing. Not because it was nice. Not because we were friends. But because after everything that had happened, it was probably the most honest thing she'd ever said. And honestly, that was enough. A year later, things looked very different. Not because some dramatic secret came out. Not because there was a messy divorce. Not because anyone got some grand karmic punishment. Just because reality eventually caught up with everyone. Tom and Tammy stayed together. They had their son. They bought a bigger house. Life went on. And, to her credit, Tammy finally stopped trying to force something that was never going to happen. We weren't friends. We weren't enemies. We were simply two adults connected by children. Nothing more. Nothing less. Pickups became easy. School events became peaceful. The awkward conversations disappeared. If we happened to sit near each other at a game, we'd exchange a polite hello, and then focus on the kids. Exactly the way it should have been from the beginning. The funniest part was that once Tammy stopped chasing my approval, she actually seemed happier. She started building her own life instead of measuring it against mine. And once she did that, there wasn't really anything left for us to argue about. As for me, I got exactly what I'd wanted all along.
Peace.
I never found some perfect revenge. I never got a dramatic movie moment where everyone realized how wrong they'd been. I didn't need one. Because the truth was that the day Tom left was also the day I stopped organizing my life around him. At the time it felt like my world was ending. Now, looking back, it was really the beginning.
The house stayed mine.
The kids grew up surrounded by people who loved them. My career took off. I made new friends. I traveled. I laughed more. I slept better. I built a life that had absolutely nothing to do with my ex-husband's choices. One afternoon, years after the divorce, my oldest daughter asked me something while we were cleaning the kitchen. Mom, yeah, are you glad Dad left? The question caught me off guard. I thought about it for a moment. Then I answered honestly.
No.
She looked surprised. I smiled. I'm glad I found out who he was. Because those weren't the same thing. I wasn't grateful for the pain. I wasn't grateful for the betrayal. I wasn't grateful for the sleepless nights, the lawyers, or the heartbreak. But I was grateful that I didn't spend another 20 years married to someone who could walk away from his family so easily. That knowledge was painful, but it was valuable. My daughter nodded thoughtfully. Then she said, "That makes sense." And it really did. Some people spend decades wondering if they should have left. I never had to wonder. The decision was made for me. Tom chose his path. I chose mine. And somewhere along the way, I realized something important. Tammy never actually stole my husband. She took a man who was willing to leave. There's a difference. The marriage ended because of the choices Tom made. Everything after that was just people learning to live with those choices. So no, Tammy wasn't my friend. She wasn't my rival either. She was simply a chapter in a story that had already ended. And eventually, that's what Tom became too. Not the love of my life. Not my greatest heartbreak. Not even my biggest lesson. Just a chapter. One I closed a long time ago. Then I turned the page and kept going.